Right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to October 16th, 2025 meeting of the Envision Eugene Technical, oh my gosh, Envision Eugene Technical Advisory Committee. That's why we call it ETAC. Tiffany Edwards, and I'm the current chair. I think it's been, I don't know, 100 years or so. Um, so I want to welcome everybody. We have a lot of new faces. And so I thought what we could do is just start with some introductions because I think we have a number of new folks that have just joined us. And obviously, Alexi, who's just come over from the Sustainability Commission. So welcome. But I'll start and then I'll just kind of call on folks and then let everybody go. So I'm Tiffany Edwards. I've been on the ETAC for, I think, about 7 years. I serve kind of, I think I'm filling a role through the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm the vice president of the chamber, and I do all of our policy and government relations work. I also serve on the Planning Commission and have been on that since 2018. So I'm in my second term there. So this committee is like all the super wonky technical stuff that sort of feeds into a lot of the work that I do. So I actually appreciate geeking out here. I'm going to kick it over to John Borofsky, our vice chair.
John Borofsky, Pepe and Johnny's. I got on here because when I was sitting in Tiffany's seat and the Planning Commission. So back in, I think I got on here in 2012, before it was even EETAC. It was the TAC, Technical Advisory Group.
Okay, Kim, how about I'm just going to call you all in order on my screen. So Kim, go for it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Arscott, and I'm new and excited to serve and a realtor.
Great. How about Jeff?
Hello, I'm also new. In fact, I got to meet just about everybody on the screen here a month or so ago at the first meeting. So this is meeting number two. And welcome, Alexi. You're the only one I haven't met yet. And my intro is that I was a international geophysicist, retired to Eugene 4 or 5 years ago, and I just love to geek out on maps and math. So this is the committee for me. So,
You're definitely in the right place. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Great to meet you and see you. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela Arias. I work at Hobach Lewin, structural engineering firm in town. I have like a background in landscape architecture and was always kind of interested in like urban planning and that type of thing. And I am also new and excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm going to go to Sue next.
Okay, so Kim's new, Jeff's new, I'm old, in more ways than one. So my involvement with this project started way back with infill compatibility standards, which started with neighborhood, planning and that sort of thing, which was, I don't know, it was like 25 years ago, maybe 24 years ago. But I've been involved with ETAC from the beginning. I have lived in Eugene for about 57 years, and I was an elementary school teacher first. I was a residential real estate broker for 10 years, and for the last 35 years, a commercial real estate broker. I am retired, but very busy.
Thank you, Sue. And how about Counselor Kaczynski, Eliza?
Right. I'm Eliza Kaczynski. I'm the Ward 1 Eugene City Councilor, so I'm the Eugene City Council representative to this committee, and I've been on it since January, which is when I took office on council. Thanks.
Great. All right, Alexi, you're up.
Hi, I'm Alexi Miller. I'm actually from Eugene and moved away for some time, came back about 7 years ago. I've been on the Sustainability Commission for 2 years now, and this is my first ETAC meeting, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm the Sustainability Commission liaison to the ETAC, which mostly means on the ETAC.
Right. Well, awesome. Thank you all. And it's really great to see all the new faces. And Sue kind of touched on this. I'm going to let staff introduce themselves as well, because I'm assuming that not everybody, but I just wanted to touch on real quick that the, when I joined the ETAC, I was kind of coming into a group that had been doing all this work, and they kind of worked on the whole UGB expansion work. And so I was the new kid. And I think at this point now, I'm kind of one of the, I'm not the oldest on the committee, but I'm sort of midway, having been here about 7 years. And so it's really awesome to see all the new faces. It's exciting because it's just great to have new people on there. But Elena, if you want to make an introduction, then we'll go to Heather and then we'll get going.
Sure. I'm Elena. We met Alexi and I and Heather. We got to meet in person and have a little orientation, that kind of the same thing that we ran through in our August meeting. And I'm an associate planner on the long range team working on the growth monitoring program.
Awesome.
And I'm Heather O'Donnell, senior planner, also working on the growth monitoring program in long range planning with Elena. And yeah, we did the same overview. So Alexi's had that. And I wish we had had that for some of our previous ETAC members that had started. We didn't really have it in such a good, the training in such a good, like detailed fashion. And I am glad, that's one of the positives, just to build on what Tiffany said. Having new people forces you to rethink how you share information and what people might not know. And so I actually found it really helpful to put that training packet together. So that's just, you're already making an impact, and we haven't even really done anything yet. So
That's great. I love that there's a training packet too. That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. I'll just go through a quick little spiel on the Zoom meeting protocol. I think we're all pretty used to Zoom by now. Typically, we try to ask folks, unless you're having technical difficulties, but to keep your camera on. Just, it's a public meeting, but avoid using the chat function. It's not part of the public record, so it's just hard to track on that. So we just ask for folks to keep messages off that. And then if you usually, staff will be giving presentations, and so folks will have questions and whatnot. And oftentimes they'll just want you to chime in with questions. If you just, raise your hand or raise your virtual hand, I can see everybody at this point. So I'll just let you know that that's totally fine for me. It's also fine to use the raise hand feature, and I'll just call on you, or, staff can call on you. So it's pretty informal, but that's just typically how we run things. So does anybody have any questions or anything about that? I think pretty used to that by now. Agenda review. Has everybody had a chance to see the agenda? Any questions or changes? Okay. And then it sounds like I saw this on here, but I wasn't sure. So we're just reviewing the Zoom.
Yeah. I mean,
meeting
unless anyone has any changes. So we had been, because we were sort of in and out on people and meetings, we were just acknowledging the minutes without making a motion. I think now I think we'll want to do that tonight as well. And then moving forward, now that we have a full committee, we can start making motions to adopt the minutes moving forward. But for tonight, unless there's any comments or corrections, we'll just acknowledge them.
Okay. Anyone with questions on that? So you don't need a motion. You just need sort of okay.
Yeah, as long as there's no contesting that. Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess the last thing before we move into our growth monitoring agenda item, public comment. Do we have any public comment that you've all received that you'd like to share?
I have not received any public comment. It does look like we have an attendee on the phone tonight, just FYI to everybody, and they're listening. So
okay. And so we don't know that anyone has anything to.
Right.
Yeah, I just see a phone number. So okay. Okay. Well, fantastic. That was easy. I think we're ready to move on to growth monitoring and density methodology. So I'm going to let Heather take it away.
All right, everyone. Well, kind of foreshadowed this at the training. Apologies that for some of you, this is your first non-training official meeting, and we're just getting right into the details of density and changing methodologies, which is not something we usually try to do or want to do, but it just happens. And usually it's in the vein of the land use code changed, and so we need to change our methodologies. A data source changed, so we need to change our methodologies. In this case, it's that we have come up with a better way to refine the actual densities that we're seeing from development permits. So this is the category of making the data better. You all heard us talk about our 80-20 rule of realizing that perfection cannot be the enemy of the good here, and we're trying to do the best that we can with limited resources and acceptance of the lack of perfection due to automation, needing to automate things, trying to control for manual errors, but also recognizing that they're going to happen anyway. So we're trying to just this is long range planning, so we don't have to be super precise. And density is one of the things that is kind of one of those key metrics that if we had the opportunity to make it better, we took it. And so it did take us like a year, given everything else on our plate and revisions to the way we were collecting data, the reporting mechanism, a bunch of other things. So, we don't, like I said, we just don't do this lightly. So what I was thinking we might do with this, because we're, like I said, diving right in, is I'm going to assume that you all have read the materials. So before we get into detailed questions, what I'd like to do is show you some of the numbers behind the charts, because that's something that I didn't do. And in hindsight, I think I should have put in the materials is the summary numbers that got us to those charts. So like the density, what was the actual math that got us to the density we were seeing in low density residential, so I can give you those numbers in some fun pivot tables. And then what I'd like to also do is walk through two examples, a simple one and a more complex one, that show how the data comes out, how we initially see it. What I'm going to call, it's not really raw, but I'm going to call it the raw data. And then how it gets sliced and diced to come up with the results that we have of average density by plan designation, housing subcategory, all of those charts. And part of that is just because it's hard to kind of articulate the process that we go through to get to those charts in a memo. And so sometimes I think it's easier to actually, see the spreadsheets, and we don't often provide the totality of the spreadsheets to you all because it's a lot of information. So what we're doing right now is reviewing the methodology and then showing you some examples of what happens when we apply this methodology. And then, then I would love to know if there's questions, concerns. We can also come back and revisit this if we need to. But if that makes sense to you all, that's how I'd like to go forward and then kind of come back to questions. Okay, great. Then I'm going to see which screen I'm sharing.
We can't. Oh, okay.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Now we just see the presentation. I think that's right.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for some reason there seems to be a bit of a lag. Okay. So can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have these. Oh, I don't know. Can you, let's see. Can I move this? Are you seeing the bar at the top of the screen, or are you just seeing the slide? Okay. Because there's a giant bar across the slides for me. Okay. So if you're following along in your packet, I put these charts in order as they are in the back of the document. So what I wanted to show you is you have a good comparison in the back about what the charts looked like and they're outlined in yellow before we did this methodology change. And then in green, that's what I'm showing you here. And so when you take the updated methodology, what we were doing was taking the sum of the total units for the development site, and then we were dividing that by the sum of the total acres of the development site. And so it's a pretty simple, like when you look at this table, you're like, sure, it's pretty simple. You're taking the total number of units that were used in the density calculation for a parcel that was low density residential. So you're taking all of the units that were in a low density residential designation development site. And then you were taking all of the acres in that same low density residential portion of a development site. And then you're just dividing those units by those acres to get the average density in low density residential. So it's really just kind of, instead of summing up the individual density of each development site and then dividing it by the total instances, what we're doing instead is we're summing up the data that was used in each of the density calculations, which again is just the total number of units and the total acres. So what you see here is for all of the developments in low density residential, there were 4,570 units that were used in low density residential density calculations, over 606 acres, and that resulted in an average density of land in low density residential of 6.7. And so you see that over on the far left bar. And so I've got these in order, top to bottom, or left to right of what's in the bar. So you can see, basically, I just wanted to kind of show you the math that got us to these numbers. So we do the same thing for housing by subcategory, where you're basically saying for all of the projects that had, instead of all of the projects in low density residential, we're saying all of the projects that had single unit detached what was the total number of units that were used in those density calculations, and what was the total number of acres? And then you're just dividing them and getting 5.6 as being the average for projects that had single unit detached.
I see that Kim has her hand raised.
Oh, I see it. Sorry, Kim, it kind of blends in. Go ahead.
I just, for clarifying purposes, I kind of understand the math, what you're saying, single unit detached, number of units. And this is just for clarifying, and acres.
Yeah.
Does that mean the 5.6 is how many dwellings you can put on one middle housing lot? Is that what that deciphers down to?
The 5.6, so single unit detached isn't middle housing. So our middle housing types are townhouse, cottage cluster. They're kind of in the middle there. Townhouse, cottage cluster, 2 to 4 dwelling units. So those would be your plexes.
Yep,
But this is reporting on what we actually saw, not what you can do. But when we looked at development permits from basically the end of 2012 through the middle of 2025, on average, single unit detached projects on average got 5.6 housing units per acre. That's what they developed, 5.6 housing units per acre. Whereas townhouse projects developed 11.8 on average housing units per acre.
All right.
And if we went backwards, this is looking at the plan designation, which roughly equates to the zoning, and saying for projects, which could be any housing type, projects that were on low density residential, they got 6.7 housing units they developed 6.7 housing units per acre. And it's higher, 6.7, than the single unit detached, because not all of low density residential is developed with single unit detached. Some of it is with middle housing, which gets a higher average density. So that's the slicing and dicing that happens.
Yeah, I get
Go ahead,
that.
John.
John's got his hand up. I'll let him.
Okay, so I think that explains why the question that I had was, it seemed to me that the commercial on this screen was quite a bit lower than what we've been seeing in commercial, because most of those student housings were on commercial and took up a very small amount of acreage, but put a lot of units in there. So is that why there's that big discrepancy?
You mean the commercial here versus the commercial on this one?
Yeah, it just seemed like commercial at 17.2 density per acre is pretty low, considering the amount of units that we've seen built on commercial.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is commercial land. This is on commercially designated land. We're seeing 63.3, and that is mostly the 5+ dwelling units at 28.6. We've also seen some 38.7 of the other multi-unit. The commercial housing type subcategory, I'd have to go back and look, and we can do that when I get to the example. But that is not just, it's a housing type. It doesn't have to do with the land. So I don't even remember if it's a really small amount, and I can't remember if these even occurred on commercial land. I think they might be, it's either specialized housing or it's single room occupancy. I can't remember. So remind me, and we'll look that up when we get to looking at the spreadsheets. But there are two different, the commercial, just to be clear, this commercial is the plan designation of the property. This commercial is a housing type.
Okay. Jeff, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, part of this was the math on the commercial that in the first figure, the density is 63, but none of the subcategories even come close to 63 when you break it out by subcategories. So I was just wondering how you got such a high density. But my real question is a follow through on the second slide where the two highest densities, 38.7 and 32.5, are for hard to define entities. What is other multi-unit as opposed to 5 plus? And what is group quarters?
So group quarters is defined. That is nursing homes, jails, which we don't see a lot new of. Nursing homes, jails, and um, public dormitories. So we typically don't include, well, I'm showing you group quarters here for transparency, but when we're talking about housing units, we typically don't look at group quarters because they're their own type of housing unit. We analyze those separately. So I'm including them here because they're a housing type, but typically when we're talking about just housing units, we don't include group quarters in this chart.
Yeah, and the other multi-unit as opposed to 5 plus?
Okay, so let's just get they're pretty small. So commercial, that was John's question, and yours is other
Other
multi-unit.
multis.
So we have um single room occupancy is the other multi-unit. Okay. Because we put it in other multi-unit instead of just in the multi-unit because single room occupancy, well, for one thing, the state was trying to figure out how they wanted to define it and they didn't know. And so us having it as a separate category allows us to put it wherever they decided that they wanted to put it. And then it turns out they want to split it out. They want to categorize it if it's less than 6 bedrooms in a single room occupancy, then it's single unit. And if it's 6 or more bedrooms, they want it categorized as multi-unit. So this category is single room occupancy that is 6 or more rooms. So that's, we just had, I mean, you could just think of it as multi-unit. It would just come up in multi-unit. It's just kind of a special category. Sometimes we have to give, when housing units are a little bit different, um, different than a standard unit that has its own kitchen, its own bathroom, its own door. It doesn't have shared common facilities like an SRO often does. We end up putting them, like, kind of separating them out so that we can deal with the fact that they're a little bit different than some of the more standard housing types. And then the commercial housing type is assisted care or assisted living. So I'm just gonna go back here.
I just want to note that Phil has joined us. So welcome, Phil. We'll make you introduce yourself to all the new people when we have a little break.
Hello, I'm Phil. I'm sorry I'm late.
Better late than
go ahead, Tiffany. Sorry.
No, I said better late than never. Nothing important. Keep going.
Okay, I'm gonna go on if that's okay. So we did the same thing for average density by buildable land inventory categories. So just like our buildable lands inventory, our land in the urban growth boundary is divided up into comprehensive plan designations. That was the first chart we looked at. Land is in our buildable lands inventory is also has categories, and we use vacant, partially vacant, developed, committed, and protected as like the high level categories of land. And so what this chart is saying is that um, the total number of units that developments on vacant land used in their density calculation divided by the total number of acres that those projects on vacant land used in their density calculation resulted in 8.9 density average for projects that developed on vacant land. So that again is only by these categories. So that vacant land category could mean it was any type of housing could happen on vacant, it had probably happened on vacant land, right? It could be low density residential, medium density residential, it's all mixed up together into that vacant land category. So again, this is just a third way to slice and dice the different charts. And then you may not be surprised that the last tables in the attachment, the density by land characteristics. I did not try to do a pivot table for those because it was just really hard to do. And I think it's much easier to show you in a spreadsheet how the data matches up to the table that is density by land characteristics. And when we talk about land characteristics, what we're talking about is land that is a certain comprehensive plan designation. It's at a certain elevation, above or below 900-foot elevation. It's at a certain slope, above or below 5% slope. And it's a certain size, less than an acre to 5 acres, or 5 or more acres. That's how we have our buildable lands inventory divided up. And so what we have is the density, the average density by those kind of small groupings. So it's basically kind of taking plan designation and like breaking it up even more and getting the density within those. And the reason that that's important is because the last time we did the urban growth boundary analysis, we started out with getting an overall city average for low density residential. But low density residential in flatland develops at a much higher density than low density residential in the hills. And so we really found it important to make a distinction when we were assuming capacity, what kind of future capacity we were assuming on vacant small flatland versus vacant small or vacant big. So that's why it's broken up that way. And I imagine we'll do some of the same breakout. It's just a more refined way of getting hopefully a better realistic assumption about what the densities might be on based on the different land characteristics. So I'm going to stop there, and I'd like to show you, not this cat. Okay. Um, so we have a lot of things we can look at here. You got a bit of a sneak peek. You could see how, when I undid the filtering here, you can see, actually, I'll just undo it. So this is what we call the raw data. As I mentioned earlier, we get these spreadsheets that come out of our data collection system and give us these rows of data. And the Form ID I talked about in the memo, that's the development site Form ID. So every development site has its own Form ID, and then we add development to that form over time so that we can really see development changing over time. And it helps us collect the information about redevelopment when something is demolished and then new housing units are added, changes of use, capturing that over time, things like that. So when we get this raw data, what you'll see is I've highlighted here the instances where development site form, so for instance, Form 7 has multiple rows of data. And so we use this as the foundation for slicing and dicing it according to those charts we were just looking at. So we don't want to just take the raw data and then add up the number of units from that, or add up the the number of unit, like filter it and say, oh, okay, so we want to look at low density residential designation. Well, you can see in this one, this is plan designation, and Form 7 has a low density residential record and 3 medium density residential records. So already right there, you know that something's going on, that you can't just simply add things up. So I'm just going to take a couple of examples and walk through them and to help you see how the methodology is working and see what questions you have. I'm going to go back to my selected ones. So let's look at Form 578. First, I want to show you. Can you still read that? Is it too small? It's kind of questionable, it looks like.
It's small for me, but I'm actually looking at a small screen anyway, so
Oops.
that's why I have these.
Is that better?
Yeah.
At all? A little bit? Okay, so Form 578, you can see right here, I've got a form number. Well, this is the data and we've showed this to you all before periodically, but we have this monitoring relationships data. And what this is saying to me is that for this development, there's one new dwelling that was submitted and reported, but basically for this purpose, it's, there's one new dwelling unit for reporting. The average density of this development site is 12.5, the buildable density. It's actually one single family unit. Well, it says single family because this is old, but we've changed that language because now it's single unit. But one single unit, it's not a townhouse, it's a single unit detached. What else are we seeing? We're seeing that this development site, so the map and tax lot number, it's on tax lot 3700. It has one planned a comprehensive plan designation, medium density residential. It has one BLI category that's undeveloped, which we translate into vacant. We kind of use those terms interchangeably. But then, so if I go back to my spreadsheet, there's 2 rows here. And it's like, well, that's interesting. This seems like the simplest scenario. It's one tax lot, one plan designation, one all the things. Why does the raw material end up with 2? And the reason is that the development site tax lot 3700 used to be, when we originally ran the buildable lands inventory, it was part of this tax lot, BLI tax lot number 1200, and it was part of this tax lot, BLI tax lot 1300. So that's one example where we would end up with two rows of data, is because to pull in the buildable lands inventory data, like what the plan designation is, what the development potential, the BLI category is undeveloped, to pull in this information, we have to look back at the buildable lands inventory. And if by the time they submit their building permit, the tax lot has changed since we ran the buildable lands inventory back in 2012, which happens a lot, we end up in our data with these multiple rows of data, for example. Another reason you might end up with multiple rows of data is if the property is split by, it has more than one plan designation, it has more than one BLI category, and so on. So we'll look at that example, but that's what's going on here. So it really is duplicate data. We really don't want that other, we only want one row of data for this one. So when we remove duplicates on plan designation, this one again has one plan designation. So we see that it deleted the row on plan designation. So we just have one row, which is great. We also know it was one unit, so we should have one housing subcategory. And we do. When we deleted on that, when we delete on housing subcategory, what we call remove duplicates, we end up with one row. For the BLI category, same thing, one row. And then for the BLI land characteristics, medium density residential, below 900-foot elevation, 0 to 5 slope, 1 to 5 acres in size. This is an example again of where it could have been split, but I guess the area of the current tax lot, when you look back at the BLI, it was all the same land characteristics. So that's why we ended up with one lot, or sorry, one row. And then for, oops, I didn't have this one. Hold on just one second. And then for the number of new dwelling units, one. Again, if we went back to the raw and we looked at the number of new dwelling units for reporting and we added it up, we would have gotten two because it was duplicate data. But when we control for that, we end up with one, which is what we want. Any questions on that one so far? Or is that it? Can I jump to the next example? Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said I don't see any hands, so.
Thanks. I guess the other thing I would point out here is, actually, maybe I'll do it on this one. Okay, so this next example was one that was in your, in the meeting materials. So this is form 3961. We go, this is this one that was in your materials. So just reminder of what we're looking at. The tax lot is in blue. It is split zoned. GO, general office, is in gray, and then R2, medium density residential, is up here. When you look at the underlying comprehensive plan designation, which is what the buildable lands inventory uses, not zoning, It's actually split a little bit differently. The line doesn't exactly fall in the same place at a high level, it doesn't fall in the same place. This is not precise, but just at the buildable lands inventory level, it doesn't fall in exactly the same place, but it's pretty close. And we've got commercial here, which aligns with geo, and then this is medium density residential, which aligns with the R2. So when you look at, should I go back to the other version or can you see this? Okay.
Well,
It's kind of hard. It looks okay, hold on.
it's just if you just make it a little bigger.
Um, how's that? Is that better? When I make it bigger, it tends to smush the words.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to read. So in this example, we have 159 new units. And here's the R2 zoning, which is split by commercial plan designation and medium density residential. And then here's the GO portion of the development site. And it is split by commercial and medium density residential. The reason there's 4 rows here is because 2 of them, because of the split designation, are associated with the again, this is old language, but multifamily 20 or more units. Can you see that in the hover over? Are you able to see that? Okay. The other 2 are about other related development that's happening on the site. So it might have been, a parking area or something, but just to capture that the whole site was being developed. And then you can see that we split up the units for 27 units were happening on the R2 MDR portion of R2. There were no units that we saw, housing units, actually happening on the R2 commercial portion of the property. And then we did the same thing down here, 132 units on the GO commercial and none on the MDR. Okay, so that's orientation on that one. When we get the raw data, we end up with 4 records. And the interesting thing about this one is that you might immediately think, or I immediately thought, oh, maybe these 2 records are somehow duplicating because, and I know I'm going really fast here, but just trust me, it's all the same data in both of these rows. And I was like, well, why are they duplicating? But actually, it's 4 legitimate rows. If I go back to this one, you would see that there are 4 permits. So these are the building permit numbers on the left. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to allocate the number of units to each building permit in the database collection system. And so that's another way, especially with multi-unit, when there's one building permit for each building, that we can come up with multiple rows of data.
And Heather, are these different building permits they don't represent different structures. They would just maybe represent different stages of, like we just got a building permit for a deck, right? So
they do. You are required to have a building permit, one building permit number for each building structure.
right, but could it be that
Oh.
you have more than one building permit and it's still just one structure? Or it would have to be separate structures. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we are not, so like your deck example, we are only pulling in building permits that add building square feet or add dwelling units generally. We are also pulling in some other ones like a new ball field, that's taking up land. Things like, you're right. I mean, if you're doing a new apartment building, you might end up having, after the fact, you might end up having a building permit for an HVAC system. We're not pulling that in because we don't care.
Okay.
So it is a limited number of permits that we're bringing in. It's only the one associated with the new dwellings, essentially, in this case.
Okay. Jeff has his hand up. Go ahead, Jeff.
Heather, just a little backdrop. I walk by this property almost every week, so I'm
Oh,
very familiar with it. Um, and what's striking to me about it and looking at the plan for it is that there's a huge amount of parking lot for this in the plan. And I'm just not quite sure how parking and parking structures fit into the density calculation. So the units, there's going to be four buildings on here. There's going to be a three-story building and a couple of four-story buildings. But there's going to be a huge amount. In fact, some of the parking that's already in the currently designated R2 will be parking for the future buildings. I'm just wondering how parking and parking structures within a lot fit into the density calculation.
yep. So, let's see, I'm not sure what the best thing to show here is. When we, okay, so when we control for plan designation on this one and we say we want to know, we want the records from this development that is by plan designation, because it's split plan designation, we'll end up getting two records. And what um, the information, the data that we're using from those records is the total number of units from summary for each record, and then the total density source acres. And those density source acres are the buildable acres that are being developed. And so that could be that they're being developed with the building, the parking area, a park, a landscaped area. It's all included in that acreage. And so we would say 159 units divided by whatever the density, or sorry, whatever the buildable acres are to get the density.
Yeah. And
So in this case, we're saying,
the parking
let's see,
area is
what
included.
designation are we in? We're in medium density residential for this record. So on that portion, it was 27 over 6.7. And there was, for commercial, there was 132 units over 4.36 acres.
Okay, and I just had one other follow-up because this is a good example of what might be considered protected. There's a on the southern boundary of this lot, there's a big abandoned creek with 50-foot tall trees. And
Whoops.
the southern part of this lot probably is not developable. I don't know if you had a photo of it back in one of the
Um, that's along Country Club.
no, it's not on Country Club, but
This
yeah,
is the southern portion.
yeah, that southern boundary
Oh,
is
right in
in the
here,
middle of
right?
an abandoned creek with about 50-foot wide belt of undevelopable land.
Hmm.
And I was just wondering if there had been any cutout for protection or a protected area for this.
Let's see. I'm gonna have to pull up. If there was, I'll just take me a minute here, then that is the point of us getting the density of buildable land because we're trying to get, so when you do density for the purposes of zoning, at the time that they're reviewing the building permit, they're looking at the whole tax lot and they're just saying number of units over the tax lot acres. That's the density. For us, and for forecasting forward in our buildable lands inventory, we actually want to know the number of units over the buildable acres. So taking out those protected acres, if they actually are protected, taking out committed acres. Because we don't want to project forward to your point that we're going to build in protected land when our regulations don't actually allow it. So that would be overestimating the capacity of land. And that's part of the reason this is so complicated is that that's why we have to match our building permit data to our buildable lands inventory because they don't have that information at the time of building permit. They don't need it for reviewing building permits for zoning. We need it for our long range planning. So let me just pull up this property. And it may be that it has a creek there, and I know what you're talking about. I can't remember if it's protected, but it may not actually be protected. And that's what we have to use per the rules to take off land from being buildable. It has to actually be protected. So let's see. We'll take 1 second here.
I just want to acknowledge Phil has his hand up. So Phil, whenever Heather's done with this one.
Yeah, so that whole southern boundary is in the middle of a creek.
Yeah, it must not be protected. It's not coming up as,
Okay.
and actually we can even see it here when we look at, yeah, there's no protected
No
acres.
protection. Yeah. Okay.
So it must be developable, at least not locally protected.
Got it.
It may not be feasibly developable, but yeah.
Yeah, 50 trees are going to be in the way.
Okay. We ready for Phil?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you've covered this already, Heather, but so far as does this track tenure? So if they were to build, say, condos as opposed to apartments, or even if they were converted at some later date from apartments to condos, or vice versa?
Does it track it? Like, oh, in our reporting system, you mean?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I
if
can imagine, I can just imagine that maybe you would get a question about, or
yeah.
maybe, the planning department would want to ask themselves, like, hey, are there any new condos being developed? And if so, where? Or, or not. I don't know.
Yeah, we would have to, yes. Oh yeah, I think we will want to I think we will want to know that in the future. At the time of building permit, the only way we know that it's a condo is if it's already platted. Um, they can do that afterwards, and we don't update this system, but we can use RLID, the Regional Land Information Database, to query what we call condo lots. There's a flag in the system in the GIS system where and then we can match that to building permit data. But yeah, I think that is something because I think there's a lot of interest in making it easier to do home ownership of attached units. Yeah. But this doesn't have that information. In fact, we don't even have 10-year like rent or own on a single unit at the time of building permit. We don't have that info.
If I could follow up just with a question. So I would think that maybe it would be of interest to know that one, if we follow anybody were to develop it following condo law, you would see it perhaps like on the project at 17th and Pearl, the Midtown building, which was intentionally built as condos vertically. But you might see, and I'm sure the hope was through a lot of missing middle statutory changes, that somebody might build a triplex. I was just talking with a guy tonight, in fact, part of the reason why I'm late. Guy who was telling me about he built a triplex on a property. He's not turning it into condos or selling them individually yet, but he could. So I would think that's sort of data that would be useful to track about the efficacy of those kind of things. And if it translates into, hey, we've got these laws have translated into more homeownership and not just simply, apartments.
Yeah, definitely. And we didn't, it's not exactly that, but in the growth monitoring report, we have been putting the number of submitted and approved middle housing land divisions to try to get at that. But yeah, we will need to refine that a little bit more. But this is still new, and I think that there's going to be other things that we're going to need to update in the monitoring system with the new Oregon Housing Needs Assessment rules. So it's, I think, easier, kind of, if I even want to use the term easier, to kind of know what all the changes are that we're going to need to do so that we can map them out. Because they might be related, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's a good call. We don't have that. I will say that in the context of how we calculate density, though, it doesn't matter if it's a condo or not. So like those apartment or those condos that you were talking about on Pearl, we like if they had come in and they were condoed lots, we just say what is the overall acres of the lot and the number of units and ignore the fact that each of the unit is an individual condo lot. Okay. So this one, just again, this one is has two records because it's split designated. Um, when we look at the housing type, though, there was only one housing type on the development site that was proposed, and so we just end up with one record. So that's an example of where the four goes to one versus the four records going to two. And when
Heather,
you look,
do you have to manually scrub through these, or is this a way? I mean, I'm just curious if you have this like methodology for recognizing. I mean, I'm looking at like the thousands of rows, and
yeah.
you guys have to go through one by one and try to figure out where's the duplications and why they're being duplicated, and then I don't know.
Yeah. No, yes and no. I mean, we can't go through all of them. So what we do is we try to find examples like this where we know it's split designated. We know that there's multiple permits associated with it, and just try to look at those examples and see if the system is deduping things correctly. Previously, before we made this change to the density methodology, we were doing the deduplication manually in a sense where we would go in and we would take the raw and then there's a function called remove duplicates. And then we would set that to those parameters, remove duplicates on Form ID and plan designation, or Form ID and housing subcategory. And then we would check the detail, the revised detail against the chart and, you know, the data in there. But now we've been working with our IT staff they're like, you know, do that once, okay, do that twice, you need to document it. A third time we're automating it and we were doing this removing duplicates feature every time we looked at the data, and they were like, okay, we need to automate this. And so these are all individual detail sheets now that we have from them, which is great.
Okay.
So we don't have to do that now.
Kim?
So I've sold the condos in Fairway Loop, and those are in a floodplain. And listening from the state level, some rules that are coming down with regards to the floodplain is needing to, if you build something, you have to remove a certain amount also. And what Phil said, or Jeff had said with regards to an old creek or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm sure that takes into effect the process of this. Do we know, will these be considered to be in the floodplain?
You know, that project of updating the floodplain maps and the new rule that came out has just been going on for what, 4 years now? It kind of keeps going back and forth, and they're adding areas in and then taking them out. So when we run the buildable lands inventory, we have been tracking the floodplain work that's going on at the federal level, and then basically pulling those layers into our buildable lands inventory so that if it ends up that there's more area that is actually floodway, which is protected, or if we adopt local regulations that say a a portion, or, you know, let's say we said you can't develop in the floodplain, then we will be ready to discount that land and say, no, that's considered protected, because, you know, because we've said you can't develop in the floodplain. I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I'm just giving an example of we're trying to be ready for what's coming down the pike without knowing when it's actually going to come down the pike and what it's actually going to look like and what it's going to mean. Because just, you know, when they adopt the new floodplain maps, if they change the floodway, then that's easy for us to say that's protected. But if they change the floodplain, which right now we allow development in, we wouldn't be changing that unless we changed our zoning code. And that's a whole process in itself, changing the zoning code, as you know. So it's like, I don't even know if that would happen in time for us when we run the next buildable lands inventory. So it's a bit of a timing issue. But yes, we are tracking that, and it would be part of you know, our projections of where future capacity might happen or not. Let's see. Going back to this example, I just wanted to show you that when we're looking at the number of units, number of new dwelling units for this Form ID 3961, again, if we had had those 4 rows, we would have come up with way more new dwelling units than there actually are. But when we control for that, we get the right number, the 159. Fun fact, let's see if I go all the way back here. they have actually revised their plans, I think. And I don't know why, but they have the plans were revised. They reduced it by 4 dwelling units. And so our building staff entered that into the system. And then, Elena, I think you re-reviewed this form, and it now shows 128 units instead of 132 down here in the GO portion. Um, and that was throwing me off for a minute because I was like, wait a minute, why am I getting 159 from these rows and this is showing 155? It's because we have these stop gaps with our data where the collection system, which you're looking at right here, we review the data, we make sure it's okay. Elena looks as mostly Elena looking at it and doing quality control, and reallocating, making sure the 27 is with the right plan designation and the 128, which was 132, is with the right plan designation, and then submitting that to our reporting system. But we actually haven't pushed this data yet. And so that's why, my examples here are still showing, if I go all the way over, are still showing 159 instead of 155. So this actually, at first I was like, oh, maybe this isn't a good example for you all to see because it's been revised, but it actually shows you the level of detail that we go through to keep up with changes in building permit data. So, so the next time we run the report, if we've pushed this new set of data, which we'll do by the end of the year, for our yearly density data, the new information will be there. So this will be a little bit less dense, this property will be, and that will affect, I mean, not really affect, but that would be incorporated into all the charts.
John's got his hand right.
Yes, I see John's hand. Sorry, I was just waiting for the. Go ahead, John.
So this is all awesome, and it's showing the new members of the committee how intricate all of this is. This is a little bit deeper of a dive than a lot of times, so what we'll see. But the comment that I wanted to make is, are you guys, especially Elena and Heather, making notes of these types of things? Because you two are the ones that are doing it, but if somebody else ever has to come in and do this, I think that you need to have an owner's manual for this. I mean, just because I see turnover in a lot of a lot of agencies and stuff like that's having turnover, and the institutional knowledge that the two of you have in this program needs to be memorialized so that one
you need SOPs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just worried that at someday Elena may not be there, or Heather may move on, or and some point everybody retires, and these types of little, oh well, Elena sees this and that. I just hope that you guys are memorializing some of these shortcuts and tricks so that we don't lose the institutional knowledge that you guys have.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is actually our goals we have drafts already and part of it is because we needed them for ourselves because some of this stuff, you know, has changed over time, or like with the middle housing, that really changed how we were doing. I mean, it changed our process. And so even just for us, having the training manuals is important. But yes, our goal, we have them drafted, and we're just like dropping notes in them as we go. And then hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a really good format. But yeah, thanks for saying that. And I think the other important note on that is, there are things I would let go of now if I had the opportunity to go back, just for that exact reason, because it does take a lot of time and yeah, I mean, you don't want to be in a place where you're like, you need to know what to look for. Like um, that's not a good training manual. Like you just know it when you see it that it's a problem kind of thing. And some of this, I feel like we've definitely gotten into a little bit of that. So it's something that we're thinking about. Yeah, thanks for raising that.
And I'll just add, when we do make
Yeah.
changes to our, like the system, our land track system and the way we enter data and things like that, we use like a ticketing um program that kind of keeps track of, okay, how was it and why did we change it and how did we change it and stuff like that. So that's also documented along the way too.
So that's what I had. I don't know, so thanks for listening to me. I hope that helped explain some of what we were trying to explain in the memo. But yeah, I'd love to hear more questions or concerns. I can stop sharing because I think you all have the memo.
Does anybody have any questions? I just had one comment. Just in looking, and so I'll just admit the easiest thing when I was going through this, the visual graphics that show you the yellow and the red, or the yellow and the green, is just kind of a side by side comparison on kind of how it shifts how the methodology shifts, the actual data. And I mean, it's not nothing, and there's definitely changes to you know the I don't know. I mean, consistently things kind of went up across the board, and then of course when you get down to the ones that go down is um I'm looking at it. I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. Well, like when you look at vacant land, it goes down based on the numbers. I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say, but I'm just curious if either of you, Heather or Lena, have like reflecting on kind of how you would summarize the difference in this. Is that it seems to change things at least somewhat. Is it significant, or is it just kind of like, you know
Yeah, I mean, I think most things actually went down.
right,
And
but I mean,
so yeah. Um, and so we really kind of dove into that. And that's why I think I talked about that in the memo. I can't remember, but just like um, really trying to see if it made sense that things went down. In general. And I think and that's why I wanted to spend some time talking about the duplicates because, um, with commercial, it went down quite a bit. And so we drove commercial plan designations, and with the 5 or more units. And so we dove into that a little bit more. And basically, it was a different kind of duplicating that was happening. And again, it wasn't wrong. It was just a different way of doing the average densities. And I think, in talking with Echo Northwest about the way that we're doing it now, it's actually more pure.
okay.
And yeah, I believe me, we did not do this lightly. I was like, really? We can't use this? Well, we did, and Echo was like, yeah, I mean, we can, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think you need a more refined level of density, then kind of the average of averages is what you're getting. And it just doesn't take into account the scale of the project. It's giving the same weight in the averaging to a single unit that has a high density compared to, you know, something that was like 300 units and had a high density. And you don't want that. So that's my reflection, is just that everything went down a little bit. Um, and and just from the sleuthing that we did, the spot checking we did, it seems to make sense. Um, and I'm happy to say that it makes sense to me that you want a method that would take into account the scale of the project and not give equal weight to this kind of development versus this kind of development.
Yeah.
Elena, do you have anything?
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to call on Kim, followed by John.
Your triage and your Excel sheets just like blow my mind, but I love it. And I mean, you're a genius. All the cross references and triaging. I'm so excited to be here. But thank you for everything. It was amazing. That's all.
John?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for me, this is exactly what this committee and your staff is charged with doing, and that's getting the best data that we have available to make long range decisions on. I know Sue will back me up on this. You know, in the past, I remember when we were trying to do the UGB in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, and we had to look at sloped land. And it was like, oh, geez, we better go in and start looking at what is true density on sloped land as opposed to the other. And it was pick one, looking at maps and tax maps. And the advanced that we have made since then is just amazing. What, both with technology and with the knowledge that you two bring to this, is just staggering as from where we come. And that is really exciting because we were making a lot of assumptions back the last time that we did this, and they were some of them were almost gut assumptions. You know, it was Ed McMahon saying, "Oh, this, you know, that lot will never get built on because of this, and this." And now we have actual hard data that we're going to be able to make real assumptions on and be responsible about how we're planning our land use in the future. So I'm just really excited, and I want to thank you guys for all the work you did.
Ditto. All right, I've got Angela next, and then Sue.
Hi, I was having issues with my microphone earlier, but I think you guys can hear me now. Okay, good. This might be too specific of a question, but when you guys were talking about the duplicates of data, and if you have different line items with the same designation, and you said that it has gotten automated, I was curious if what the protocols were for filtering it out. Like if it was, if you have 4, do you pick like the one with the highest amount, or how that is decided? Or is it, when you say it's automated, I was assuming there had to be some kind of criteria set to it.
Yes, devil is in the details on that for sure. So in the example I was showing where there were like the single unit one, and it had just 2 rows, because it had the 2 older buildable lands inventory tax lots. That's why I was ending up with 2 rows, but we really only wanted 1. In that case, it was just taking the data in the most recent row, because they were essentially the same data. So it was taking the data in the most recent row.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. In the other case where I guess it was kind of doing the same thing, but in the other case where it was split plan designation and there was 4 rows and 1 row for one plan designation and then 3 was in the other plan designation, it took one of each, and the one that was 3 rows of, I can't remember which one it was, but it was 3 rows of one plan designation. Again, we told it to take the most recent one.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's what we told it to always do, is take the most recent version because, or sorry, not version, most recent row because we want the units that it's using to be the most recent version of that data. Because um, with multi-unit, sometimes the development permit or the building permits come in over time. And so if we took the, let's say the 4th row down or the reverse order, the last one, it might only bring in the units at that time, which might have been 50. But if you bring in the most recent row, then it's going to bring in all the units that are of the current data set. And that's what we want. We want all of them and not just part. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Go ahead, Sue.
Well, I'm just sort of blown away by the place that this has gotten to over all this time. I think those of you who are new can see the astonishing amount of work that the staff does to get to this point. And when those of us who were on the technical resource group many years ago, the temptation was really to kind of gravitate over towards policy opinions and decisions, and we had to really stay away from that. Same thing with ETAC. We are not policy people. We are just reacting to what the staff is doing. And I think this place that this has gotten to now just should give us all a whole lot of confidence about the data that is being used to make policy decisions. So I'm so excited about where this has gotten to. It's huge. And I have to tell you that when I got to page 4 of the work and saw the outcome paragraph, I was so relieved to read it because it's dense stuff. It is dense. And, I've been doing this for years and it's still very complicated and dense. So the way the staff presents it and just the amount of work that they've done on it gives me a lot of confidence that it's really going the right direction. So thank you very much.
Okay.
I can just add one more thing. So with this group's, with your review, we're going to have one final review by the consultants. We have to use their time wisely. And so I wanted to get kind of your input, fresh eyes on it, before we send it back to them. They have been helping us all along, but we kind of wanted to send them the final, okay, this is what we think. So we'll let you know if anything changes, but.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next agenda item? Are we done? You guys ready? Okay. The next item on the agenda are ETAC elections.
Oh, we've all been waiting for. Angela left because she does not want to be elected.
Oh,
Um,
so bad.
so
Okay, go ahead. I'll let you take it over.
yeah, I
item.
mean, if we don't, yeah. Tiffany and John have been our chair and co-chair for a long while. I think they're ready to pass that over. This is our first public official meeting of ETAC since the new fiscal year. In terms of chair and vice chair, it's not a huge commitment. We usually just send the chair and vice chair the agenda the week before a meeting. Just, does this look okay? And then the chair, calls on people, leads the meeting, says, welcome, we're here, walks through the agenda like Tiffany did today. And the vice chair does that if the chair isn't available. Um, that is about it. There's not a huge other layer of, um, commitment or time. So I don't know if
I
you want
move, I move Kim and Jeff as chair and vice chair.
Second. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to ask if there's any discussion. Maybe should we hear from Kim and Jeff?
Yeah.
maybe.
Do you have questions? Like, if you have questions about I feel like I'll just share before to start the discussion. Uh, Elena is 100% correct. It is not difficult. It's an easy group to manage. You're mostly looking for hands raised in the queue, and so I don't want anyone to be intimidated by um, this particular role. I have seen other bodies and elected bodies that have been dealing with a lot of Robert's Rules of Order, and it's a little
Oh,
crazy. And like this group is nothing like that, so they're very forgiving as well. So
is it sort of like being the substitute teacher if you're not around, Tiffany?
Yep.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah,
because I think at the very beginning of this meeting, you were a couple minutes late and we were already designating who was going to be, chair in your absence. Is that correct? Is that sort of how it works?
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and usually I'll communicate with John, and there's often times where I can't make a meeting and whatnot, and we would communicate, and he would always know that I need him to, so to speak, man the gavel. So, and we've been primarily, and maybe staff can speak to this, we've primarily been meeting virtually since the pandemic. We have met a few times in person, and so there's definitely a certain dynamic to managing a Zoom room. It's a bit different than when you're in person, but maybe you all can talk about our plans for future meetings and kind of what our cadence might look like as far as meetings overall, but also just percentage of in person versus virtual. I don't know, Heather or Elena, do you have thoughts on that?
We talked last year maybe about doing a quarterly in person or a meeting where it really made sense, like the orientation. I know it wasn't an official meeting, but doing that I think in person was great. Um, I really, next year, I'm just gonna say, next year is gonna be wild. I really don't know what our cadence is gonna look like. I do think that it's very likely it will be more dominated by urban growth strategies work and less with growth monitoring. We may not even do a report next year for growth monitoring. We may just do the spreadsheet, or not spreadsheet, but this table summary that has all the data in it, but not actually do a lot of text around it. We need the data because it feeds into the urban growth strategies work, but it's the same people doing all of this. And so we have to kind of be strategic in where we use our time. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, just to be clear, we are looking for a new chair and a new vice chair. So it's both. I think both Tiffany and John are ready to relinquish the reins.
Gavel. Yes. It's a slate. It's a ticket. Okay, Kim. Well, no, Phil, you had your hand up, but you took it down. Do you want to?
I was just going to simply say thank you, Tiffany and John, for your work in being fair arbiters, meting out justice in our meetings, and just you guys have been great in just kind of being ringleaders for this. And I think it should be pretty light work for Kim and Jeff. And I'm gratified to see some new people take the reins, and it should be pretty easy. I think this is a pretty collegial group. So yeah, I was just going to call for the question.
Okay, great. Kim, I'll let you go.
I think it's a terrible mistake to have someone who's only been at the second meeting to be a co-chair or a chair. Like, you guys run a great meeting, and Tiffany, if you've heard my husband complain about my volunteerability. I would really love to be on the committee a little bit longer before I take those roles. And I'd like to take a few other things off my plate. Although I very much appreciate the nomination and I understand what new blood means and it's necessary, but
So,
I'd really like a few more months.
I'll put it backwards. I'll go Jeff as chair and Kim as vice chair. So you can move, you have a whole year of learning.
I would second that. I don't know if we did that right, but are we replacing the motion? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I don't, and maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I don't spend more time as chair than I would. I review the materials just like I would otherwise. There isn't additional time, with the exception that they send the agenda to us in advance, and it's always great and it's ready to go. So I honestly would tell you I don't spend much more than the time that you all see me and then studying for the materials. So if that's helpful.
Jeff, are you willing to?
Maybe. I was hoping if I had spoken up before you did, John, I was going to say a split between some of the more seasoned veterans and one rookie. My ideal, if I had piped in first, was to have Sue as chair and me as vice chair.
There would be support for that. Sue, go ahead, speak.
Thank you, but I decline.
Now you all know I've been chair for 100 years.
But I nominate Phil.
Someone
Yeah, but I
be a
showed up
mentor
late.
for me.
That's I'm disqualified because I showed up late.
Who's not here that we can nominate?
Alex, are you interested?
Given that this is my first meeting, I'm gonna have to decline. I got to figure out how this thing works before I
You know
actually.
what? Maybe I might make a recommendation to table the elections. I'm happy to.
That's fine. We can do that.
Because I think we should have a few conversations. Like I'm happy to reach out to a few people and really kind of gauge interest and see, so that I think in fairness, I saw it on the agenda, but I truly didn't know if I should be reaching out to anybody, but I'd like to maybe do that, and maybe John and I can have a couple conversations. There are some folks who aren't here as well, so
Like Rick.
Just Rick.
Rick's not going to do it.
The other thing I would add, and Sue, that's totally fair because you chaired initially. You've done a chair already and a co-chair, and I think we extended your time as well. So just want to recognize that because not everybody was here. I think based on how this conversation is going, I agree with tabling, and I think we will probably need to instigate a rotation. I don't want to be the principal, but it does feel like, I get it. I don't think we're a very hard group, and it is another thing for you to have to think about while you're in the meeting, and you do need to make sure that you assert yourself, get yourself in the queue. So you have to think about that. So I get it. So yeah, I think Tiffany and John, if you're willing to maintain your positions for a little bit longer, that would be great. And then I do think that that is a good idea to have somebody like Phil, who's been here for a little bit, do a year or even if it's 6 months, just to help folks get their feet under them. Unless Tiffany and John, one of you wants to stay on for another 6 months. But I do think that's a good idea. And then the other person, the new person would be the vice chair. Did we just lose Phil? Oh, okay. Good. Sorry, Phil. I'm just throwing it out there.
Bearing him off.
If Tiffany and John are not willing to be chair and co-chair for life, then I was going to be my next motion, but I'd be willing to help out if it just moves us along. And I'd be happy to get together with Kim, Jeff, Alexi, Angela, whomever. And I'm sorry I missed the orientation meeting that y'all had.
And the PERS benefits are fantastic.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
There's that.
Yeah.
Joking, of course. Thank you, Phil.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Well, since I'm still chair, uh, let's move to let's Heather and Elena, you're both on point for these next couple of items. So do you want to it's just kind of next steps in upcoming meetings. Do you guys want me to just hand that over to you?
I don't think we need to talk about them. They're there for your reference. There's lots of TBDs. As soon as we have more information, we'll let you know. But I do think that we'll get into buildable lands inventory stuff either in November or early December.
Okay. And can I just ask a couple questions? I'm just looking, actually, I'm trying to, my mouse isn't working here. Oh, flipping to the calendar. So for the new folks, like a lot of times, just when we look at the tentative agenda, when do you all think we can firm up dates as far as Heather and Elena? What do you think? Just full transparency, there are times where we're just like, we're waiting on information, there's other conflicts and whatnot, so we end up canceling a meeting. We don't ever add meetings. We don't ever like pop in and like, oh, we're going to add this meeting or anything. It'd be rare to do that. In fact, I've never seen us do that, but there are times where we certainly we just end up canceling a meeting, not quite ready, but usually it's
I would say we're not going to meet on the 6th. November 6th for sure. I doubt we'll meet on the 20th. November 20th.
Okay, so we don't have anything that's imminent right now in November, but if we do, you would let us know, and those would be the dates that potentially. So we should maybe.
Yeah, but I think the 6th will go ahead and send a cancellation for. I'm not ready to send the 20th yet, but a cancellation for that, but I think it's pretty likely that we will cancel.
Okay. That's helpful, but I always keep it on my calendar until I get the official word, just so nobody else schedules over me, but that's.
Thank you.
So see, everybody, all of you worried that you're going to become chair and have to chair the next meeting. It's going to be a month or so. So, well, that gives us some time to do some outreach, right, John?
Phil's going to do it. All right. I need to log off. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn our meeting. I think we're done.
Thank you.
Right, everybody?
Thank you.
Good evening.
This
Thank
has
you
been
so
illuminating.
much. Thanks, Alexi.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.